Hi, it's Barbara and welcome back to Wiki Design. Today we have a special guest on the channel today, Blair Kaplan from Philly Content Consultant. Blair is a website copywriter and I'm super excited to have her on the channel to talk about how good copy creates an effective website. Thanks for coming on the channel today. We're so glad to have you here.
Hello, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
So tell everybody before we get started where we can find you.
You can find me at www.phillycontentconsultant.com, or you can email me at Blair, Blair, at phillycontentconsultant.com.
And I will make sure to put her links down below so you can get in touch with her. So Blair, tell us a little bit more about your background and a little bit more about yourself.
Absolutely. So my background is actually in advertising and public relations. I am a former Penn Stater, although once you're a Penn Stater, I guess you're always a Penn Stater. And so when I graduated, I did what any broke recent college grad does, and I thought, okay, well, let's take out a six-figure loan and go to law school. And so that's what I did. And I graduated from law school. I sat for the bar exams, and then I had the conversation with myself that I probably should have had years before, which was, what do I actually want to do with my life? And I knew that I loved the creative nature of advertising, and I love the analytical side of law. But for me, advertising wasn't quite analytical enough, and law was not quite creative enough. And that's kind of how I fell into marketing, which I like to think of as the love child of both. And so I ended up after law school going into marketing. I actually ran the marketing department of a wealth management company for about 3.5 years. Yeah, it was fun and definitely a crash course in everything marketing. And during that time, I came to the realization that of everything I was doing, I loved writing the most. And so that's how I ended up as a copywriter.
That is such a cool story, especially the fact that you went to law school, you went through that whole process, became a lawyer, but then you realized that your true passion was in copywriting. So tell me, how long ago did you start Philly Content Consultant and kind of what was the process of getting that started?
So I left the corporate world back in 2018. So it's been about 5 years now. I have been a freelance writer for probably over a decade, but I made the leap into doing it full time about 5 years ago. And I've always been a writer, I've always been a storyteller, but it was something that I didn't realize could actually be a career, which I'm sure sounds a little funny to some people. But I kind of, so at the time, I had just started a new job, and they were merging with another company, and I ended up being let go about less than 2 months after I had started, and I was devastated at the time. But it kind of forced me into doing what I was afraid of doing, which was starting my own company. And it's been a passion project essentially from the very beginning, and I haven't looked back. I absolutely love what I do.
It's funny that you said that getting laid off from your job was kind of the catalyst for starting your own business because I have a very similar story.
Oh,
Worked
really?
for I worked for a lot of different small businesses and I got laid off after working for like a little over a year with a company and that was kind of it for me. I was like, you know what? I think it's time to just go all in on starting a business. So I can
Yeah.
definitely relate to that.
It was like a sign. I like to think of it as the best, worst thing to happen to me. So,
Exactly. And I think that we get these signs and we have to listen to our gut and just go for it sometimes.
absolutely. It was a good decision.
Yeah. So we have a content first approach at Wiki Design, meaning that we don't start a website design until we get the content from the client. And we've talked a lot about that on this channel. But I would love to hear from your perspective as a website copywriter. Why do you think it's so important to start with content first?
Absolutely. It's definitely, I'm with you on that. It's definitely imperative that you start with the copy before the design of the website. And that's for a few reasons. One is obviously a matter of the layout in terms of knowing how you're going to lay out your website. If you don't know what you're putting on your website, you're obviously going to have no a way of knowing how you actually want to lay it out. Is it going to be three separate pages? Is it going to be five separate pages? There's no way of knowing unless you have the content ready. But then the other thing that I think a lot of people fail to think about is the fact that everything that you do is an extension of your brand and an extension of your brand voice. And so if you don't know what your brand voice is before you're starting your website, it makes it really difficult to be able to work with somebody like you, Barbara, to be able to let you know what type of website would make the most sense, right? So if you're a fun pizza business, for example, and your brand voice is relatable and quirky, you're going to want the design of your website to really mirror that. Whereas if you're, an attorney, like myself, and maybe let's say an estate planning attorney, whose work is a little more serious, and maybe your brand voice is more professional, and informative, then you're going to want the design of your website to really match that. It's kind of like designing a website without your copy would be kind of like laying out the chapters in a book that you haven't written yet, right? You don't know how many chapters, you don't know what that's going to look like. And so it's kind of like doing it blindly. So it's really important that you have your copy ready to go before you design your website.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. One of the things that I personally struggle with when it comes to copywriting is I know my brand, I know my audience, I know the message that I want to get across, but I just don't have enough skills, I guess you could say, to write it and make it sound good. So, one of the things that you helped us a lot with was kind of punching up stuff that we had already written and making it sound a lot better and more effective. And I think that people have a misconception when we tell them you might want to hire a copywriter that they're going to take whatever ideas that you have and just kind of like wipe it away and start from a blank slate. But that's not really the case. I know that in a lot of cases you actually do what you did for us, which is like take something that somebody already has and just make it sound better and more effective. So I think that for some people it might be a little scary just because they don't know the process. And if you could explain what your process is in writing copy for websites, that would be great.
Absolutely. But to go off of what you just said, I think that most businesses, they do have an idea of their voice or what it is that they want to convey to their target audience, and maybe they just don't have the best way of doing that. They don't know how to do that
Mm-hmm.
effectively. And I like to say that I'm glad that they don't, because I wouldn't have a job otherwise. And someone like you should be able to focus on doing what it is that you do best, right? And that
Mm-hmm.
goes for any business owner. So I think that's the first thing. And then to answer your question in terms of what that process looks like, again, I think, and I'm going to keep coming back to this, I think one of the most important things when writing copy is to really know what the identity of a business is, what it sounds like, who you're targeting. And so I start with a phone call, which gives me a bit of an idea of, what your goals are, what you're looking to achieve, what you want your audience to come away from your website feeling and thinking, what you want their actions, their steps that you want them to take, what you want those to be. And then after that, to follow up on that, I generally send a questionnaire. It's pretty short, which goes into the same kinds of things, right? And then what I do is I do my own research of the company. So if you already have a website, I'm going to be looking at your website. I ask if you have any marketing collateral. I'd love to take a look at that, so that we make sure that everything is cohesive. And then I'm going to do a little bit of competitive research as well. I will then, using all of that, I'm going to write a first draft of everything. I'm going to email it to you. We're going to discuss it. You're going to let me know if you have any changes. We'll make some revisions, and then we'll get it going.
Yeah. It sounds actually pretty similar to our process in that it's collaborative. And I think that, kind of going back to what I said before, where people think that the copywriter is just going to start from a blank page and completely write everything. It's not really like that. You have say in what goes on the website. You have say in what goes on any marketing materials. So I think that makes it a little less scary for people when they know that they're not going to just go in blind to this process. They're going to have a lot of input into what happens.
Absolutely. They're not relinquishing control.
Right.
They're maintaining control, because at the end of the day, when it's not my business, I don't know, the identity of the business. I can help, my clients to figure out what that identity might be if they haven't really kind of established that yet. But, I really want the way that I write to reflect what the identity of the business is. And so they're not relinquishing control. Like you said, I really like that. We're just collaborating.
Yeah.
It's a joint effort, and I want my clients to be happy. I want to feel good about what I'm writing and know that it sounds good, and all the other little things that we worry about as writers, like SEO, everything is
Mm-hmm.
incorporated, but we both have to be happy, right? And
Right.
so it's a joint effort, really.
Yeah. So, how do you approach working with a client in an industry that you're not really familiar with? What does that look like?
So that's where I think actually that my background in law comes in really handy. When you go to law school, I mean, some people might feel otherwise. I think it's like learning a new language when no one's really teaching it to you. You're kind of learning it. You're thrown into it, learning it on the fly. And it gives you a really good idea of how to look at more complex information and be able to analyze it and break it down. And I'm also somebody, I really enjoy learning new things, and that's one of my favorite things about what I do, is that every day is something new. I get to learn something new. So I'm really going to be reading up on the industry. I'm going to be talking with the client, again, figuring out what their message is, what they want to get across. I'm going to be looking at their competitors. And a lot of it just comes down to doing my homework, and just informing myself as much as possible. And I actually do think that there's an advantage, and a lot of times, to being, a layperson in an industry, because when I'm looking at information, especially if it's, more complicated, more complex, I have to break it down for myself in
Mm-hmm.
order to be able to process it. And so in doing that, I think it helps me to make it, a little bit more digestible, for the consumer.
Yeah, I agree. I think that going in without knowing really much about an industry does help in the writing process, because one of the things that I think a lot of people struggle with is kind of dumbing it down, for lack of a better word, to make it digestible for somebody that knows nothing about how the business works, how, the services are. So I think that is actually a huge advantage.
I feel the same way. Yeah.
After a company launches their website, what recommendations do you have for them once that process is done for their marketing efforts?
So from my standpoint, I think there's, if if a if a company does nothing else, I think there's a few things that would be really helpful. And I think the first thing is having some type of, dynamic content on the site. And that's going to help for a couple of reasons. So when I say dynamic content, it could be something like a blog, posting a blog regularly, right? And the first thing with a blog or anything that you're posting like that on your site is you're going to want to do it on a set regular basis, whether that's, a weekly basis, a monthly basis, a quarterly basis. You want to be able to commit to that so that when people are looking at your site, they can almost expect, when they're going to find new information. One of the most important reasons, there's two reasons really that I think that that's extremely helpful. And one is for SEO. If you're not familiar with SEO, not you personally, but anybody watching this, obviously you're familiar. It stands for search engine optimization. And it's essentially what helps to boost your ranking when you're looking on a search engine like Google. And so having certain keywords, on there and having new dynamic content is going to help to boost your position on a search engine. That's the first thing. The other thing that's really important is to then use social media. If you're in an industry where there's no compliance issues, then leveraging social media is huge. And depending upon what industry you're in, maybe it's Facebook or LinkedIn or Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. But in using social media, you can actually use some of the things that you're posting on your website, and post them on social media with a link that's going to lead back to your website, which is going to gain more traffic for your site again, which is going to, first of all, again, boost, your SEO rankings. And it's also going to obviously bring in hopefully more business. And so the more you can get people to your site, the better. And so those are the two things that I would really recommend after you finish your website from a marketing standpoint. If you do nothing else, would be to have a regular blog and to utilize social media to essentially market, yourself, position yourself as a thought leader and bring people back to your site.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think to add to that, you want to make sure that whatever social media channels you use really do fit in with your branding. If you're a lawyer, going back to that lawyer example, you're probably not going to be posting videos on TikTok. I mean, maybe there's probably lawyers on.
Some people do.
Yeah, I'm sure
Crazy,
there's lawyers on TikTok. I don't personally have a TikTok, so I don't know, but I think you just want to make sure that you're going to wherever your audience is hanging out. That's really important. There's a lot of advice out there that says, be everywhere, post all the time, live on social media all day, do nothing else. I don't agree with that kind of Gary V, mentality where it's like, you got to go, go, go. I think that's just ridiculous. I think you're going to have much more effective results if you focus on maybe one or two channels and just kind of do that instead, because that's where your audience is going to be, and you're going to save a lot of time by not posting on all these places where there really isn't people that are interested in what you have to say.
Yeah. So to go off of what you were saying, what you touched on briefly, is that you want the channels that you're using to be appropriate for your business and what your business is about. So for example, if you're a photographer, then a site like Instagram is going to make a lot more sense because it's very, focused on imagery. But like you were saying, if you're an attorney, it doesn't really fit what it is that you do or what it is that you're trying to convey by being on something like Instagram. Right. I'm sure there's exceptions, to everything. Like we said, there are lawyers who are on TikTok. Mm-hmm. I mean, but again, I think it's most important to focus on, where your target audience is. Yeah. And then also what fits with your business and your service. And your brand. And your brand and what's most appropriate, I think is really important. It's better to do a couple things really, really well than to kind of put yourself exactly to saturate, yourself and then make yourself not look as good or not look professional. I think that's really important.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so It's been so great to have you on the channel to talk about this. I have one more question for you. This is something that we just like to let people know. What are any tools or software that you recommend that could be helpful to a small business owner?
Yeah, so a couple of things that I would recommend. The first thing, which is it's kind of funny and might seem a little silly, would be even just Microsoft Word. I think that there's so much that Microsoft Word, can offer that people don't utilize, even down to, if you're trying to write something on your own, let's say, just finding synonyms for words that you're looking for. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that's the first thing, which is very basic. And the next thing that I would recommend would be a program called Grammarly, which basically takes what Word does, which is, check for spelling errors and punctuation, that kind of thing, but it takes it to the next level. So it's going to look also at sentence structure. It's going to look at, does your sentence, come across as harsh, or what does it sound like to the reader? And so that's actually really helpful if you're
Yeah.
writing something.
I use
Um,
Grammarly.
do you?
Yeah, I because it's when you're writing something quickly, or even like an email, you want to make sure that things are grammatically correct and spelled right, and it will go in your email and scan it and to make sure that
Yep.
you don't sound like a dum dum. So
I
I like it. I use it all the time.
Yeah, and the cool thing about Grammarly too is that for the basic version of it, it's actually free,
Yeah.
and I think it's like a plugin essentially. Is that what you
Yeah.
call it, a
A
plugin?
browser extension, I think.
Browser
Yeah.
extension, yeah, yeah. I'm not sure exactly how much like the next level is, but there is a free version, which is at least a really nice place to start.
Yeah.
Um, and then the other thing that I would recommend would be constant contact. If you're going to be sending out emails, if you're going to be, sending out emails maybe with your
Hmm.
blog article links in there. Constant contact is a really cool program to use. It's online. You have to pay for it, but it's not too bad. It's online, and then you can put all of your contacts or your leads into the program. You can separate them into different lists depending upon, what they're interested in. Makes it really easy to send out emails. It makes it really easy. They have a ton of templates that you can choose from that are really very easy to customize. And then it actually tracks the performance of your campaign, which is really great. So that you get feedback, and then you can figure out, things as intricate as who's clicking on a link,
Hmm.
where are they clicking in your email that you're sending, things that are really useful for then going back and
Yeah.
figuring out, okay, this worked, this didn't work. You can do A/B testing in
Okay.
there. So that's really helpful too. And then the final thing that I would recommend, which isn't solely, it's definitely not like a copy based program, but Canva. And I
Yeah.
think you definitely you use Canva, right?
I I don't personally for design projects, but I have a lot of clients that use Canva because it's really kind of like a stripped down version that somebody that doesn't have a design background can figure out. So I
Very
recommend
true.
it for a lot of our clients to do, like social media graphics and
Yep.
little presentations and marketing flyers. It's a good program to use. And I believe they have a free version as well, right?
They do have a free version, and I think the one that, so the difference between the free version and the one you have to pay for is that there are certain images that you can't use
Yeah.
if you won't pay for it. But there's certainly a wide collection of images and graphics and stuff that you can use even with the free version. But it's definitely worth, at the very least, checking out the free version of it. And
Right.
like you said, it can be really helpful for, flyers,
Yeah.
social media posts, easy
Stuff
to use.
stuff
Yep.
for after you have your brand figured out, all those
Yep.
graphics and collateral. It's a great tool. You can put all that stuff in there and even create and save templates. I know. So I know a lot
Yeah.
of clients that use it and love it. So I will put
Yep.
links to all of the recommendations that Blair mentioned in the description box, so you guys can go check them out. So thank you so much, Blair, for joining me today to talk about effective website copy. Can you just let us know one more time where we can find you?
Absolutely. And thank you again for having me today. You can find me at www.phillycontentconsultant.com. Or you can email me at Blair, that's spelled BLAIR, at phillycontentconsultant.com. And I would love to talk to anybody, answer your questions, no obligation, anything like that. Just have a conversation.
Yeah, and if you have any questions for Blair, leave a comment down below. And if you're up for it, I'd love to have you on maybe in a few months again to talk about copywriting as well. Maybe you can answer some of those questions if you're
I
up for
would
it.
love to.
Yeah,
I
that'd
would
be
love
great.
to. Yeah, absolutely. Bring them on.
Okay, well, thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel if you're not already, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any new videos. And we'll see you next time. Bye.